Hello, is this, oh, it is working, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Samaya Keynes. I'm an economics columnist for the Financial Times. I'm delighted to be here. This is a topic that's really close to my heart, a topic I've written about. And you know, it's good to be here. It's good to think about this, and it's good to be reminded sometimes of how much progress there is still to be made. So just to give an example, I recently wrote a piece about the economics of motherhood. And yeah, and so I mentioned the huge gap in promotions that opens up around the time of your first child, a gap that opens up and then essentially women don't catch up, right? And one of the responses I got, and you can guess the gender of the response was, well, actually, I think it's quite reasonable for pregnant women for companies to wait until a pregnant woman's come back from mat leave to give them a promotion. And my response was, well, that's illegal. So you may think it's reasonable, but the law says otherwise. But that kind of attitude, I feel, is still sort of prevalent and is kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the the problematic ways of thinking about this area that are still out there, even though we've got huge efforts of everyone to change that. But today isn't really about complaining about the men. It's about asking what people can do better. What can we do to kind of really celebrate women, celebrate other groups, and how can we make things better? How can we get that progress? We are going to have a few minutes of Q&A right at the end, but mostly this is going to be a discussion. We've got a really fantastic panel. I'm not actually going to introduce them. I'm going to be very lazy and get them to introduce themselves. And so could you possibly introduce yourself, just going this way to that way, explaining who you are, and then which bit of the problem you spend most of your time thinking about?
Hello everyone, my name is Diane Grayson. I am the founder of the Ethnicity Pay Gap campaign. Sorry, can you hear me now? Is that okay? Sorry. I am the founder of the Ethnicity Pay Gap campaign. The campaign's been going since 2018, and the problem, there are many, but I think for today, I really would like to think about the issues relating to Black, Asian and other minoritized women and the impact and challenges around unfair pay and the fact that the ethnicity pay gap is not being addressed, and the issue relating to gender. And we all know, everybody talks about the gender pay gap, but they're not talking about the ethnicity pay gap. And there is a double effect because women are affected by the gender, and obviously if you come from a minoritized group, you're also going to be affected by the ethnicity pay gap. So I'm extremely passionate about it and feel that things need to be addressed to make sure that every woman has pay parity.
Wonderful, thank you. Cressida?
Good morning, I'm Cressida Myers. I'm International Head of Multi-Asset Portfolio Management at JP Morgan, where we manage assets on behalf of endowment and foundation clients. So what that really means in real language is I make investment decisions, investing capital on behalf of charities and foundations into the markets to compound the wealth of these endowments and charities over time so they can spend or give money to their ultimate purpose in terms of grant giving or project beneficiaries. So that's my background. I've been doing that for about 16 years. I think the problem statement that is probably quite obvious to me is that, and there's actually a quote that I can give you, which is that there's more people in the UK called Dave who manage investment portfolios than there are females managing investment portfolios. And so, yes, I know, it's funny, but it's also, we were just saying, it's funny, but it's also really quite shocking in this day and age, I think, that that's still the case. So that's a very clear problem statement and something that as a firm, JP Morgan is really trying to tackle head on, partnering with lots of different organisations, for example, charities like Girls Are Investors here in the UK, to really think about how do we not just think about, but actually action, how do we make change?
Hi.
Great, Viv, yeah.
Good morning. First of all, great to see everybody because I get very excited to see things happening at Coco's, and there's a lot less alcohol than there normally is when I'm here. But I just want to welcome everybody because my problem, I'm going to start with problem and then introduce myself. My problem is I want to give people the skills and the confidence to actually get going. I think that the corporate conversation is super important. The government conversation should be really important, but how many people in the room think that the government's going to solve the problem? And so I'm about personal empowerment, actually giving people ways of moving forward, focusing on the individual. And part of the reason why that is the thing that I am most concerned about and most passionate about drove me to set up my business, Black Bullion. I'm the founder. I spent 10 years in wealth management, helping the ultra wealthy become ultra wealthy, most of whom were men. Obviously, working with all men. The start of my career was in sales, which was, guess what, all men. So I don't necessarily think that it's terrible that we've got a lot of guys out there, but I would love to see a lot more women also. So a lot of my drive is to raise women up as opposed to what feels a lot like what's happening, which is try to bring men down. I think every person in this room has everything that they need to do everything that they want, barring the fact that obviously there are more disadvantaged groups and there are more groups that require more focus because for all the reasons that we're talking about. But I would like to think that everybody has enough to be able to get started. And that's really where my core kind of passion and area is. Although I know that that can be a little bit more controversial.
Great. Okay, well, I want to just move us straight into the what do we do section of this, right? And so you've already touched on this idea that actually, individuals have a lot of agency, have a lot of power, can do stuff. Should we maybe kind of go back in the reverse order? So could you, I guess, expand on what you mean by, people have enough you want to help people get going. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so the company I set up, Black Bullion, is a financial well-being company. We work with universities and colleges to help students and young people at that age. So we do have any number of older students because the student population has dramatically changed in the last 10 or 15 years. But I started that because I think that yeast helps the dough rise, right? The earlier you put resource in, the more time there is for stuff to compound, whether it's money, whether it's knowledge, whether it's confidence, whatever it is, the earlier you start, the higher your trajectory is. And so I set up the company because I think if you can start doing stuff at 18, 17, 16, 15, which is when I've made my first investment, I was 15, you make a lot of your mistakes early. There's a safety net to catch you. There are a lot of people who'll give you the kind of time and space and knowledge and mentorship that you might not get when you're older, because we just have fewer safety nets as we get older. So the idea of getting started, I believe, is the most important part of anybody's journey. We do not develop confidence and then start and see progress. We start and see progress, and through that, we develop confidence. And as a consequence, what I try to do is get even students, and we can talk about student funding and how terrible that is and how broke students are, and all of that is true, but even students, if they can put £100 into Tesla or Apple or Nvidia, if they think that's a good idea, you start to understand how the stock market works. You start to understand compounding. So just get started. The hardest thing about investing is filling out the paperwork. Not because it's difficult, but there's always something better to do. Fill out the paperwork, send it in, put in 100 quid. And you're already 50% ahead of most people. So that's what I mean by really small steps that don't require a lot other than to simply get going. Just do it.
Okay, so just get saving, basically. Just one quick follow-up, which is, so start early sounds good, but what if you're maybe a bit older than 18? Maybe
now.
quite a bit older than 18. I mean, is it too late?
So I don't think it's ever too late, but I think that there is, right? Never too late. But there is a reality that the older you get, the more you're going to have to save and the better the market is going to have to perform for you to catch up. So everybody hopefully in the room, and if you don't know, I'm sorry, I'm an educator by birth, The number 72 divided by the interest rate tells you how long it takes for something to double. If you don't know that, write it down. It's really important. It's roughly mathematically correct. So if the market performs at roughly 9%, right, the international market's roughly 9%, every 8 years your money will double. So the more years you have, the faster that money doubles. So you can't start too early, you can't start too late, but if you start at 50, you're going to need to be saving and investing a hell of a lot more than you needed to at 30. That is simply a mathematical reality. It's not a judgment call.
And that's that
it's just
power
reality.
of compounding.
Exactly.
It's unbelievably powerful, and it's very difficult to comprehend in the human brain. But you see these charts where, you know, essentially you can be doing this because you're putting in later, or the compounding effect means that you can do this, not day in, day out, but ultimately that's essentially it.
Okay, yeah, Cresta, going on to you. I mean, just thinking about, I suppose it's, you know, giving it, what examples do you see as kind of places where we as individuals have agency to kind of make things better?
So I think the way some of the things I've been thinking about is more access to knowledge. So as you say, education is really important, but it's access to career paths as well, because there's the component of personal money management, but there's also the component of, you know, perhaps you want a career in investment management because you think actually it's really interesting. It's really varied. It's intellectually stimulating. It's challenging, and also you have a lot more control then over your own individual personal investments as well. I've always been a bit surprised by, you know, friends of mine or acquaintances who are remarkable people and sort of doing all sorts of incredible careers and, I don't know, partner in a law firm or something, and the lack of knowledge, lack of financial literacy is actually quite terrifying. And actually, to your point, there is access. Like, we have so much information at our fingertips now. It's more being proactive and doing something about it. But I think with the career access, that also, you know, I know governments and companies can't solve everything, but it is on companies to provide people with the ability to access internship programs and educational insight days. And so I think, you know, JP Morgan, for example, we're doing a lot of these types of things, insight days, ability for anyone to access those. You meet portfolio managers, you meet people who are actually managing money, but what does that mean? And in breaking it down and explaining it. And I think these types of things are really important. It's more grassroots, bottom up, but it's really valuable and enables people to understand this sort of strange space that makes no sense when you're at school.
May I add to that as well? Because I think, you know, it's about socioeconomic as well.
Yes,
you know, your background.
definitely.
And if I, excuse me, if I think about my background, I wouldn't have had a clue about any of what you're talking about, you know, and I think there has to be very much an outreach from people like yourselves to the communities to let them know that if they've got £10, what they can do with it. So even, you know, if there's more outreach programs that can help to uplift, I think there is a benefit in that.
And companies do have these types of programs, and you know, it could be better, but you know, Founders Forward, so connecting female entrepreneurs with local schools that we work with, so enabling people to understand, well, how might you even start a business, or start thinking about investing, and it's going out and enabling access.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that, you know, if for example, you're a junior employee in a company, anything else that you should be kind of pressuring your bosses to think about doing differently? I guess beyond going out to schools, which, you know, sounds good in terms of thinking about that firm's bottom line. It could have quite an indirect effect on them. Is there any kind of more direct ways of changing the corporate culture or anything like that that people should be advocating for?
You know, corporate culture starts from the top, and I think we need to recognise who's at the top, and you know, what are they manifesting down to their employees. And you know, I think there's this thing about just because somebody's good, I'm not going to move them. The fact that they're being horrible, racist, and you know, being discriminatory to women, they're still going to keep them. And I think it's very much saying, no, I don't accept that. They need to leave. we want to find the right people for the job. And I think there's got to be more of that happening.
Cresta, do you have any thoughts on kind of, I'm aware that, you're making investment decisions, is there anything in terms of how you think about those decisions or any of the kind of other architecture that you're working with that you think could be improved for kind of encouraging diversity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of literature and academic research that shows that diversity of thought, and that diversity of thought is not represented by being a woman, or it's not your physical state. It's bringing something different to the table to collectively come to a better outcome. And investing is really hard. And actually, even professional investors get only, I think the figure is 54% of their decisions right. So it's about creating an environment where people are able to make mistakes, come to better conclusions, learn from those, and that diversity really enables better collective decision making. It's easy to sort of say that without, I do think companies have a responsibility to put in place, whether it be sort of structures or career progression sort of options for people, because it isn't easy to always do that as an individual in a large organization. So for example, we have something called Women on the Move with 4 different pillars. One is a role, and this is internal to the firm plus external, and it's bringing together female entrepreneurs is one pillar. Another one is enabling people to have the education and tools to understand about investing. And so there's different pillars. And then a third one is, how do you own your career? And so there's training specifically for sort of junior to mid-career, not just women, across the board, in terms of how do you start to take ownership and take action and accountability for your own progress.
And I think there's just not enough of that going around. Not enough organisations are doing it. So there's, people like yourselves, and there's the odd bits here and there, but it's just not enough of it to make a difference, I think.
Are there any examples of really good work that you see? So, that's an example where a company's really, there seems to be a whole scheme there, right? Which is, commendable. I was wondering, Viv, oh my God, my brain has gone blank. Could you come up with like an example of really, really good work that you think has made a difference?
Yeah. So I think a lot of big companies are doing a lot of great things. I'd like to think a lot of it is coming from not just having to tick off ESG and D&I and all of the other 3-letter acronyms that frankly drive me bananas. But I'd like to think some of it is actually, if you're an organization that services a population, having more people representing that population means that you're going to better represent the people that you're trying to sell stuff to, which I think is great. I think that's a fantastic motivator. Align the incentives with the objectives and you're going to win. Whereas if you try to misalign stuff, it kind of doesn't work. I think big companies are doing some great things. They've also got a lot of budget. I do have a loud enough voice, but the microphone's gone dead. I've been told it's an accessibility thing to speak into a mic. For anybody who doesn't know who speaks, it's about accessibility for closed captioning. I didn't know that. So I think a lot of big companies are doing things. I think a lot of small companies like mine, we're 30 people, which by the way, I never thought we'd get to 30 people, but we're 30 people and it does come from the top. My expectation of my staff is probably higher than most big companies. I don't accept brilliant bastards. We don't allow that thing in my company. It's just not how we do things. It's a lot easier. We don't have a bureaucracy in my company at all. The best idea wins. I don't care. I get shot down 60% of the time for my ideas. I get told that's rubbish. Actually, the junior designer had a better idea, which is fantastic. Better a hole than an asshole. I have like a million of these little expressions. That one's my favorite. But having more women setting up more businesses is going to be a big way of changing things, because my objective isn't just to become redundant as a business because everyone develops the financial literacy that they need and I can, move on to other things. But also I want to be an example of how you can run a corporate culture. That I want people to look at a company like mine and say, what Black Bullion is doing, not just impactful and all of that, and capitalist, oh my God, capitalism, making money, but also look at how amazing the team is. Look at how there's no politics. Look at how there's no bullying. Look at how there's no sexism. There's no racism. There's none of that shit because I simply do not tolerate it in my business. So if you want to make a huge impact and you don't want to sleep and you want to be heavily caffeinated and stress your head off, start a business, definitely, and you'll never need drugs because the ups and downs will keep you going. But on a personal level, one of the things that I think is really important, and I'm writing a book at the moment about the next stage of financial well-being. So looking at young people and now looking at people in their first and second job. And this is going to sound terrible, but think of yourself as an asset. And if you are not a more valuable asset in 12 months time than you are right now, then you have failed yourself. And you can blame everybody that you want, but fundamentally it lands on you. Every single year, you should be a more valuable asset than you were the previous year. And that means some of it can be mentoring other people. Some of it can be asking for a pay rise. Women are crap at asking for pay rises, and that's on us. Can't blame your boss for not telling you that you should be asking for a pay rise. Men ask for a pay rise in every single meeting, and only 29% of women do. Is that men's fault that we're not being ballsy enough? I don't think so. So think of yourself as an asset. How can you keep growing? How can you keep developing? How do you job hop? How do you develop additional skills? Every single brilliant degree out there in the world is available for free on Coursera. The average user of Coursera has a master's degree. So a lot of these tools are there, but they're simply not being used. And frankly, that's on us. So companies have a role to play. Government has a role to play, although they're failing at it. Our parents have a role to play. Our friends have a role to play. But fundamentally, it's on you to make sure, and us, to make sure that you have enough and that you are living the life that you want to live. And guess what? That takes a bit of work. So yeah, I'm the personal responsibility girl, sorry.
And I'm just going to add to what you said in terms of asset. That's just the word that you've used. But what she's really saying is that you've got to love and respect yourself and value yourself. And if you value yourself, you'll make a bit more effort for yourself.
I just feel extraordinarily motivated. Diane, could you, I guess, give examples of what you see when you look out there in terms of like really good programs, really good examples of things that make a difference? What do you think?
I can't say much, really. Not on the ethnicity pay gap, anyway. But I ran an event 2 weeks ago, and it was a focus on the ethnicity pay gap, and one of my speakers was a gentleman called Sean Gatehead, and he is the CEO of MAP, and he was on a panel, and he said basically he recognised there was an issue, and rather than hide from it, he dealt with it. And he said he's put appropriate structures to make sure that that ethnicity pay gap reduces. He went out and he spoke to an organisation that can help him analyse the data. He spoke to their employees. One of the things I always say to people, businesses, is that they need to speak to the people, the employees. Don't just do something to them, talk to them, explain to them why things are happening. And this gentleman did that. And he really was impassioned and made sure that he made an effort to make change. And I think hearing that from him, I felt that was really, really great. And I thought that people could learn from that. And on another situation, there was an organisation that's called Genius Within, and they deal with neurodiversity. And because I had started Ethnicity Pay Gap Day, which is on January the 8th, she felt compelled to do something about it. So she made sure that she picked up the gauntlet when she didn't have to, because she doesn't have 250 employees. Small organisation, but she made a start and she made an effort, and that's the key for me. Make an effort, and make sure that you value and respect your employees enough to take them along on the journey, because it's about them, and they need to be part of the whole process.
Yeah. What do you wish that you had been told 5 years ago right? What have you kind of learnt about this area? Yeah, it sounds like you've got an answer.
Yeah, sorry, about money. I was saying to you in the green room was coming from a Caribbean background, women don't talk about money. They know how to use it. We know how to use it. You know, we know how to make sure that we can pay the bills and, you know, shopping and look after our kids, etc. But we never talk about growth of money. It's always making, you know, how are we going to live? That's it. It's not about the growth. And had I met you, people who know, earlier on in my life, I'd probably be, you know, probably in a beach somewhere or something like that. You know what I mean? It's, I think, because of the environment that I'm in, you know, being, you know, of Caribbean heritage, us women, money to us is about helping us to live day to day. It's not about making money.
So really it's about kind of breaking down those taboos, having those conversations.
Correct, yes, exactly.
So I, thankfully, given my job, I didn't learn this in the last 5 years, but I think it is useful advice, which is that that compounding, that saving, investing is so powerful. But if you have a budget for your month, put that £100 or £10 or whatever it is in the saving pot first, and then you spend everything else. Then you do the spending, vital spending for, you know, food, shelter, but that all comes first, and then your anything else, discretionary spending, comes after. It's not wait till the end of the month, if I have anything left, oh, I'll save it. That just doesn't, there's very few people in the world who manage to do that. Thankfully, I didn't learn that in the last 5 years, because I've been investing money for a while. But I think that's really helpful. The one thing I've learned in my career that has been wonderful, and I think I wish I had learned it earlier in my career, is women are amazing and want to help other women. I have developed some incredible sponsorships and mentorships more in the last 5 years. I've had a family in the last 5 years. I've sort of sought that more as a way to, honestly, to keep everything going, just point in life I'm at. And it's incredible how women help other women. We're amazing. People are absolutely amazing, and feel very lucky for that. And also pay it forward. I know that's a phrase we hear a lot, but it's great. You've learned so much, and you can pass it on, and someone can really benefit from that. And that is a great feeling as well.
Yeah.
And it's very empowering. And so, yeah, that's I think something I've learned more so, and I wish I'd known that earlier in my career. Just reach out. People don't mind.
We're going to share microphones. So I'm lucky because I had a very investment growth focused childhood, because my mum's dad died reading her a bedtime story. She was 11 years old. He had a massive heart attack and died. If you're a 2-pack a day smoker, quit smoking, people. But as a consequence, my mum's whole financial trajectory got screwed. Women in the 1950s in South Africa didn't work. So my grandmother had to get a job. And so my mum's vision of money as an empowering thing, not as a thing to buy crap with, was kind of formed at the age of like 11. And as a consequence, I was raised very financially savvy, and I'm incredibly blessed. And that's part of the reason I do what I do today. So I don't know if in the last 5 years, it sounds terribly arrogant, I've learned a lot about money. But what I've learned about myself, which I think relates to money, is I've learned to trust my gut. And again, I think it's one of those cliches that we always say, but there's a reason cliches are cliches, and it's because a lot of the time they are actually truthful. And one of the things that we're doing, and I'll kind of tie a few of the points together that we've been talking about 2 years ago, the evolution of my business, I'm not going to bore you with, I'm happy to, but you've got better things to learn about. One of the things we realized was that a lot of young people don't have enough money. The average student is actually short about £500 a month. And if you've got kids, there's a book
And
at the
they're in
bookshop
debt, right?
that goes into this, and they're getting into debt afterwards. But actually, debt's not the thing they're worried about. They're worried about simply getting through the week and paying for their bills and paying for their energy. And a lot of students only have 50 pence a week at the end of having paid for everything. So we were looking at where there's money. Now, the corporate scholarship market in the United States is $180 billion. That's with a B, $180 billion. In the UK, it's 2 million. 2 million. We're talking about corporate funds. We're talking about big companies who put money down in order to help the next generation of young people. And I turned around to my board, and because I have a board now, God help us, and I said, we need to buy this scholarship company. And we were in the middle of a seed fundraise, for anybody that understands how the funding system works in startups. And my board was like, are you nuts? Like, who buys a company while they're raising money? And I turned around to my chairman, who's a wonderful person, and honestly, there are incredibly supportive men out there as well. I don't think that we should pretend otherwise. And he was like, if you think this is important, I will back your play. And he told the board that he was signing off on it, and as a consequence, we bought this company. It was a very small company. But what we've managed to do now is we speak to a lot of big companies, and we're saying to them, there are young people who don't know what opportunities are available to them, and they're not going to look at it because they're thinking about the debt. So a lot of students who come from a kind of middle class background don't think about the debt because they're thinking about the education first and, well, we'll deal with the debt, we'll go to JP Morgan, we'll earn well, it'll be fine, I'll pay it off. Whereas a lot of students who are first generation students, have never been before, come from poorer backgrounds, they're only thinking about the debt. Exactly. And as a consequence, they don't go to university because they're concerned about the debt. And if we can remove some of that or boost their ability to deal with their day-to-day bills, they're more likely to consider a degree. Yeah. And so what we've done is we've basically said to companies, put your money where your mouth is. If you want to actually tackle diversity, if you actually want to raise your pipeline and increase the number of people that are coming through and all the rest, look what's happening in America, which, by the way, don't point to anything else that's happening in America. God help us, I was just in Seattle. Ugh, like, do not go. But look at what's happening in America in terms of people's feelings of philanthropy. There was just $1 billion, if anybody didn't see this, a doctor who gave $1 billion to Albert Einstein Medical School so that none of those kids will ever have to pay student fees.
Yes,
$1 billion.
That's amazing.
We don't see stuff like that here.
No.
We see it going into Oxford, we see it going into Cambridge, and they're also running multi-billion-dollar endowments.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of money and the vast majority of universities, that kind of thing's not happening. Now, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but that was my call as a female founder to a pretty much all male board. And I just said, we have to do this for all of these good reasons. And so the power of one person in doing anything can be enormous. Yeah. And it's going to take a village. And so we have to keep pushing. I do feel like Sisyphus, right? We keep pushing that bloody thing up the hill and then it falls down again and we start again. But it is the only way we bring about change. My mum was one of 4 women in her accounting class, 4 women out of 700 men in her class. And today accounting is majority female. We are making progress. But we have to keep pushing that ball, and we'll probably have to do it for as long as all of us are alive.
I think it's very much what you were saying. You know, doing what we do is very exhausting. But you've got to think about, if we don't do what we do, what then? And it only takes one person. So we just got to keep pushing.
Oh, that is exhausting.
It is.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about what we should be doing, but what if actually policy could do something, right? So what if it wasn't, and the counter to some of the kind of discussion we've been having is, well, why is it all down to women, right?
What's new?
Right, but where are the men? But also, what about the structures, right? What about the institutions? We've got an election coming up within the next year. Hopefully there'll be some policy debate. I'm a bit skeptical, but we can dream. What would you kind of look out for and see as a kind of positive step in the policy sphere? And I guess I'm thinking about, do we want pay transparency? Do we want new labour regulations? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I want, and I believe Labour said they would do this, to make ethnicity pay gap reporting mandatory. And that's the first step, by the way. I think that's where gender pay gap missed the trick. That it's all about mandatory. Yes, mandatory is good, but we also have to work towards closing the gap. So in terms of policy, that's what I want to see. I want to see the mandatory bit, but I also want to see the creation of making sure that organisations close the gap, because that is really, really key. Because if you don't make any effort, there's not going to be any change.
Krista?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. The disclosure piece is just the very first step. It's then
What next?
which helps with transparency, but it's then where's the action off the back of that to ensure there's change, and what is the rate of that change? Because I think sometimes the rate of change is also
Yes,
can be
absolutely.
a bit frustrating. I think companies also have a duty, and I think a lot of companies are utilizing some of the gender payback gap reporting and enacting new types of sort of support mechanisms to meet some of that in terms of career coaching or access options or fast forward accelerator programs, all sorts of things for people who traditionally have not had access to those types of things. So that's good. I mean, government and policy, it's a really difficult one. One parallel, which I think is quite interesting, is some of the green policy in the EU, because the way they've gone about it is creating regulation that forces activity and is forcing investment into green capital investment to enable the energy transition. And that's actually very proactive, because normally regulation is very reactive. It's an industry has done this, we want to stop them from doing it, we are going to react and prevent that activity. Whereas this is very proactive, and I think some of that could be applied to social policy as well, and hasn't been nearly so much. And I think that could be there could be a lot of innovation there.
Viv, I'm actually not going to come to you because we've heard...
So much to say about government.
Right, well, I think, individual responsibility was your thing, but also I want to get 5 minutes of questions from the audience. So we do have roving mics, so I'm hoping that you've all been thinking about questions. There's the lady down here. We might take a couple in case anyone else is keen.
Hi there. So you talk about the ethnicity, the pay gaps across the board here, and we talk about companies making this better and policies. But again, Cressida, you also said about everyone taking control of that. So what would be your thoughts on how do we as a community start to get more transparency? People don't want to talk about money. That's a taboo subject. Some companies even say you're not allowed to talk about how much you earn. How do we change that from the ground up?
Good question. And there's just a lady here.
Hi, so I'm a mum of 2 young children, and earlier on you talked about the earlier that you start, the higher the trajectory. And you also talked about your mum being 11 and that traumatic experience really kind of setting her on a path. So I have a question around what do you think we can do for our younger generation? I'm talking about 10-year-olds, I'm talking about earlier on in the journey. What could we do to help them, give them the right money mindset?
Great question. Okay, we're short on time, so I'm going to ask you to be brief.
Sure.
But yeah.
On the first question, I'm going to leave the pay gap stuff to the experts. On the children stuff, it is never too early to start learning, and something that we were talking about in the green room, which by the way is red, is that the reddest room I've ever seen, is that it is just about I hate the word demystifying, but demystifying. Just getting kids involved in conversations around money. Something my parents used to do is give us money in a shopping list, and any money that was left over we could keep. And what it means is that you're looking up and down on the shelves, because we all know the most expensive stuff is in the middle, looking at electricity bills. Looking at the electricity bill means that you're probably going to turn lights off, right? Looking at some of the bills that are coming through, understanding a credit card, understanding how to read a pay slip. We never saw the numbers, but we could see how the whole thing was broken down. So just demystifying the conversation. Don't make it a taboo. Make it something you're discussing around the dinner table. Your toilet paper costs £1.20. I wrote a book about this, by the way. It was self-published. It's not particularly good, but it is on Amazon for like 99p. And it's actions. It's literally, it's not like a particularly great book, but it's actions that you can do with your kids. So give them a certain amount of money and run around the house. And how much does stuff cost? Who knew toilet paper was so expensive until they had to buy it themselves, right? So that would be my recommendation. Pay gap, I'm going to hand over.
And I wanted to say, sorry, can I just say one other thing? One thing I've noticed recently is that banks have got bank accounts for children. Start that up, I would say.
But don't pay for them.
I'm worried about my children if we do this not wanting to buy loo paper.
I mean, they'll only do that once, right? They'll only do that once.
Excuse me, sorry. I was just going to say, my children are 4 and 2. My 2-year-old can't really talk yet, so we maybe not starting the financial education just yet, but the 4-year-old, yeah, exactly that, in terms of where does your food come from, and also, yeah.
Great.
The
Okay,
gender pay
we've
gap.
got 1 minute
Yeah,
left. So
So
let's
yeah,
on to the
in
pay
terms of pay gap,
It was about transparency. How
transparency.
Can we get
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I don't know. Well, you may not know. Fawcett Society have brought policy to government about right to know. So that would work across gender and ethnicity pay gap, I believe, and I think it's important. Back in my day, and I'm going to show you my age, right? I remember signing a contract, and it said in the contract, you cannot talk about your pay. Right? Now they can't. They clearly can't do that. So I think it's about trying to create an environment where people can have those conversations confidently and don't feel uncomfortable having those conversations with people because of, very quickly, did some research on impact of ethnicity pay gap on black women. A person said to me that it was through a conversation they had with a white man, she realised she was being paid less. So, try and, obviously you've got to pick the person you speak to, but try and have those conversations may be a help as well.
The other thing I would say is that if you're changing jobs and you're asked what you're being paid at your current job, you don't have to tell them.
Yeah.
And that can, or up it.
Yeah,
well, yeah. Or you could
I
lie.
like that one.
Okay, great. Well, we have run out of time, and so I'm gonna cling hold to that feeling of motivation and inspiration that I had earlier, and also I'm so thrilled that we have all of these kind of practical steps that we can go ahead with. So yeah, thank you to my panelists, and enjoy the rest of the day.